Hey, everybody. Welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We have a really interesting topic lined up for today. We are talking about dog sports training. We have a world-renowned professional trainer, really one of the world's top trainers when it comes to this topic, who uses the most current and progressive methods of preparing dogs for competition. So like when you're watching a dog show, these are the topics or the fields of competition that have to do with agility and obedience. And other than the main, AKC dog shows that you see that are broadcast internationally, we're talking about sport dogs in this episode. It's really such a niche sport that really a lot of people are into. We've got a great expert, as I said, lined up. This episode is brought to you by Reflex Knee Clinic. If you are in knee pain, these are the folks who can help you out. Check out reflexknees.com. They will help you get back to life, and I'll share a little bit more with you in a while about how they have helped us get back to life as a family. Our expert today is an author on sport dog training. She does webinars that are watched around the world. She joins us live from the Bay Area in California today, Denise Fenzi. Denise, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you start by just explaining to folks what dog sports are? And, a lot of people might not know that this is a whole area that so many people around the world are interested in.
Yeah. So when you get a dog, you love your dog. You've got this great pet dog. And most people hopefully take the dog to a little obedience class, and you learn some really basic things like how to get your dog to come when called. That's pretty critical. Not to jump on your guests, not to go to the bathroom in your house. So you have all of these little things you want to train. And some people, they see their dogs just as a little bit more than that. So they do their 6 weeks of class and they had a great time. And then they say, well, now what? And the instructor says, well, we have an advanced class. So maybe we'll do 6 more weeks with a little more off-leash control. And then another percentage of people say, now what? Those are the people who are dog sports competitors over the long run, because what they discover is that they really love working with their dog and they want to do more, and they're more interested than just the really basics, manners, sit down, come stay. They want to do the fun stuff, and often they see it on TV, they see agility or something like that, and they say, that's for me. That's what I want to do. So dog sports are for people who want a little bit more with their dog. It's an amazing world. It's an amazing world that can open up to you, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. So if you think your dog is amazing and you just want the whole world to know about it, I hope you'll stick with us and maybe you'll pick up a few things.
Now, does this go all across breeds? Like when I think of sports like drafting, like water rescue dogs, and for example, my sister-in-law has amazing Newfoundlands, and she has trained one of them in this field of water rescue, which is incredible. Is it just big dogs, or are we talking about little dogs? I know there are people that have little breeds that are interested in this field as well.
Yeah, there's sort of a distinction. There's sort of two types of work. There are working sports. So for example, a bird dog might be a hunting dog. A terrier might go to ground. A Newfoundland is a water rescue dog. Some sports are specific to the breed because the dog has been bred for hundreds of years to do a specific job. But what we're talking about today is a little bit more in the performance world, and any breed of dog can do it. So my dog's here. One is an 11-pound mixed breed terrier mix. He can do the work. And then I have other dogs that are big dogs. They're Belgian shepherds, and they're bred for very specific things over a long time. I have no idea what my terrier was bred to do. He's got a bunch of different breeds in there. A dog is a dog. Any dog can be trained. So especially if you're looking in the world of performance, I was just at a dog show yesterday, and there was tiny little Papillons, and there were some pretty big labs there too. So it's for everybody.
That's what is amazing, is that it really spans the spectrum. We have a lot of questions on social media, people who were excited about your appearance here on That Expert Show. Leska has a question for you. She wants you to explain what positive reinforcement training is and how it's rocked the dog sports world in the best way possible.
Yeah, positive reinforcement has rocked the dog world. It's actually rocked the people world too. So I'm going to take you on a real quick history of Denise. 40 years ago, I started competing in dog sports because my parents competed, and it was not a beautiful thing. I didn't really care how the dog felt about it. I had something I wanted to do, and I taught my dog to do things, whether it was heeling or recall or fetching. And the dog's opinion never came into the picture. And a lot of it was teaching my dog what I didn't want. So unfortunately, there was a lot of force, a lot of compulsion is what we call that. And it wasn't fun for the dog. And as the years have come along, we have learned a lot about learning and motivation. And what has come to pass is that whether with people or animals, when you teach others what you want as opposed to what you don't want, and you reinforce good behavior rather than focusing on negative behavior, learning takes place much, much more quickly because the stress is out of the equation. And both with dogs and children too, actually, you develop a much better relationship with the other. So my parents were fine, but the relationship I had with my parents was quite different than the one I have with my own children. With the dogs I have now, we have a relationship, and it matters to me that they love to work. It's very important to me. I won't even work with a dog if I cannot find a way to make that dog love what we do together. That's what we mean by positive reinforcement. So rather than talking in terms of pack leader or dominance, now we talk more in terms of relationship and everyone getting their needs met. I use that expression a lot. So am I happy? Is my dog happy? We're happy together. We go forward together. And that really is the basis of positive reinforcement training.
That makes a lot of sense and sounds very, very familiar to the books and videos that I've watched in raising my toddlers as well. Are we all happy in this process of moving forward together? You know, there are some people that are just new to this idea. Ashley, for example, wants to know whether these sports require any sort of special equipment. She would love to know, is it expensive? I think you mentioned it's not.
It's not. Dog sports are not expensive because so much can be done. I mean, really, if you have not a penny to your name, except for your dog food, you could go on YouTube and train almost any exercise in your house. So, for example, we use something called a disc. It's a little round disc that my dog puts his front feet on. I can go to the store, the pet store, and buy for $20 a special one that's carpeted. But actually, I use a coaster off the table because I have a small dog. So the coaster works fine for me. I have used bookshelves that we want a dog to stand on something like a plank. A bookshelf with 2 bricks works perfectly. So for most dog sports, you can get away with very, very little initial investment. If you want to spend thousands, which I'm embarrassed to admit how much money some of us spend on things, you can, but you do not need to do that.
That makes sense. Okay. And Julie wants to know, I think you mentioned a little bit, the positive reinforcement really is the best way, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that? She would like to know what sort of techniques you use that you find most effective in order to specifically motivate dogs.
To motivate. So for dog sports, if I want the dog to move faster, I'm probably going to use toys. So we spend a lot of time playing games like fetch. So I said down and the dog went down really fast. I'll say, yes, I want to mark that down and I'll throw a ball or I'll play tug. So those are the 2 most common ways to build motivation in dogs where you're looking for speed and intensity. Usually if we want to motivate the dog to be thinking about what we want and we're trying to teach maybe a complex series of behaviors, we'd be more likely to use food because food tends to make the dog think, but it's still something the dog really wants. And you know, you will have dogs that really don't care about toys but only want food, or dogs that only want food, or the reverse. Run with it. Take what the dog says I love and work with that. Praise is a much lesser we don't tend to use praise to teach. We tend to use praise to keep dogs in the game long term. So whether my dog does it right or wrong, I'm always praising. Just like if your toddler is doing something and boy, he's trying, he's close, you're going to be like, you're doing it. You're doing it. So you want to keep your learner in the game. It doesn't matter if it's a child or a person, you always praise effort. But for the M&M, for the toy, you might want a little bit more. As soon as you can get those 5 blocks, we're going to go have that ice cream. But you're doing it. So always keep your learner in the game.
That makes total sense. I have a question from someone about an owner who has bad knees and can't do sports. And I want to ask you about that in just a moment. But before we get to that, in fact, let's talk about knees, because as I mentioned, Reflex Knee Clinic is the sponsor of this episode, and they're incredible. They help my husband get back to life. If you have knee pain, you've got to talk to the folks at Reflex Knees, because if you want to be enjoying activities with your dog or your family, or maybe it's your dog family, I've got to tell you, their work with my husband was just life-changing for him. They were able to use non-surgical methods like stem cell and PRP, plasma-rich platelet treatment. This was after he had already had 3 knee surgeries, and they were able to help him get back to being this amazing dad and a husband that I could run with and exercise with and not have to worry about his knees swelling for extended periods of time and being in pain. So I encourage anybody out there with knee pain, go to reflexknees.com. You can even read his specific case study. His name is John, and find all about that and get back to life. Just had to talk about that before we go into this next question, which is from Melody. She knows someone who has bad knees, can't do sports, has a doodle that jumps and is super high energy, and they're wondering what type of activities would be useful for this dog owner.
Yeah. So first of all, I would mentally divide up mental exercise from physical exercise, because sometimes we focus on physical exercise, but we totally disregard how much energy it takes for a dog to do a lot of thinking. So start there right off the bat. Say to yourself, I'm going to train this dog, because it sounds like the person wants to be involved and wants to do stuff for 3 times a day for 5 minutes. You'd be amazed how little time goes a long way. And work on just basic obedience skills. Can you sit? Can you down? Can you back up? Can you sit up? Can you roll over? Teach tricks, use lots of food. But then you have the energy aspect too, right? You have a high energy dog. So rather than handing the dog the cookies, throw the cookies. And don't make any effort to throw them in a convenient place. So let's say you've got your dining room table and a bunch of chairs around it. Throw the cookie under the table. So now your dog has to find the cookie, has to get under the table, has to search around. Make it hard, because see, that becomes part of the game. That's the game of hide and seek. You can hide toys around your house. Dogs think that game is hysterical, even when they've learned all the hiding spaces. If you take a tennis ball or a cookie and you hide it in various places, like I would take the books out of my bookshelf, put the cookie and put the books back. And the dog was running all over the house, sniffing, 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 looking for a cookie or looking for a toy. And if you want to formalize that, then there is the sport of nose work. And so then you teach your dog how to search for a scent. And then the person said they don't have a lot of money, no problem. You could teach your dog to search for the scent of a tea bag. Or you could say, no, I want to go forward with a more formal application. That's fine. Then you buy the specific scents that we use to teach these sports. But I think people tend to overestimate how much their dog needs to physically exercise and underestimate how much you can just do with brain power. Or like, for example, my dogs do not eat out of a dog food bowl, almost ever. I buy toys that are designed for food, right? And then I stuff the food into the toy, and then I freeze it. And then I give my dogs their food frozen. So now it takes them 20 minutes to work the food out of the toy, and then the toy drops. They have to chase it down. So it gives me peace when I want peace, and it makes the meal so much nicer than, especially my small dog. I'm not kidding if I say he can eat a meal in 3 seconds. He just goes, it's gone. So you stuff it in that toy, and now you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone. You've bought yourself a little freedom. Your dog has to work for their food. It's a nice thing to do that way.
This is so interesting. So that kind of answers Melody's other question, which was that she had 3 French bulldogs that she's interested in doing nose work with. She wanted to know how to get started. I think you gave her some ideas on that and whether they will be good at it.
Yeah, so let's talk about this, because I have an important thing to tell you. I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was going over research studies. One of the studies was what breed of dog has the best nose, and they were doing it for bomb dogs. They looked at German Shepherds, they looked at bloodhounds, they looked at Belgians, and then just for the heck of it, they threw some pugs in. So it was basically like 10 German Shepherds. They had lots of each breed. The pugs blew the other breeds out of the water, like out of the water, could find a much smaller concentration of scent than the other breeds. So that little smushed nose is packing in a lot of power.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I know she didn't say she had a pug, but the first thing that came to my mind is don't assume. Don't assume that this dog, oh, this one's going to be the best one. Don't assume. Get out there and try it. See what your dog says. If you go to class and your dog is, I've been waiting my whole life to be a pug, run with it, right? Go out there and have a good time.
That's great. All those pug owners out there are going to be rejoicing and taking up this new activity. We have a question from someone named Kat. Ironically, during this show about dogs. She says, what is your preferred method of creating drive in a low drive dog, specifically for performance?
Yeah, so when we talk about drive, we mean it the same way we do for people. So if I say, wow, that child is really driven, or that person's really driven, we use that word in terms of dogs. So what we mean is all the same things we mean with a person. So lots of natural focus, lots of determination and stick-to-itiveness and want to do it. And dogs vary dramatically. I mean, you can have an 8-week-old puppy that's kind of insane with how focused it is naturally and how much it wants to do things for you for a long time. But that's not all dogs. Some dogs, they're pretty happy to sleep on the couch, and we call that a low drive dog. And that's not really a problem because actually most people like low drive dogs. The problem is when that dog is paired with a high drive handler, and the handler wants the dog to, doesn't matter what, they want the dog to go running, they want the dog to do nose work, they dog maybe obedience. And so there's a couple of things to do here. The first thing is be realistic. You need to understand that dogs do come with temperaments. And so what one dog is going to love and want to do, maybe another one isn't. So right off the bat, let's start with the idea that we want to get everyone's needs met. The second thing I'm going to do is really suggest that you spend some time saying, what does this dog love? Really love? Is it food? Is it toys? And it doesn't have to be what somebody else told you. Somebody else said, oh, my dog loves cheese. It doesn't matter. If your dog doesn't love cheese, then cheese is not the food for you. Maybe hot dogs. Try something else. The second thing is, how do you give the reinforcement to the dog? So when we say reinforcement, we mean the cookie or the toy. You can hand it over, which is blah, or you can throw it. I talked about that earlier. That's much more interesting. Or maybe have the dog jump and grab it out of your hand, or do some tricks, because a lot of tricks, like to spin, they require energy. And if the dog is putting out energy, you're naturally increasing that drive, that focus, that energy. So those are the kinds of things I would suggest that people do.
That's a great point. Elise has a question about motivation. She says, when a dog requires a reinforcer, treats, praise, or a toy as motivation for an activity, at what point or what signs indicate that the activity itself has become the motivation? And if the motivation is activity, how and when should the reinforcer be used or changed?
No, that's a sophisticated question. In my own training with my own dogs, it would be very unusual that I would take away what I call classic reinforcer. So a classic reinforcer is usually external. It's usually food or toys, maybe praise. But like I said earlier, I give praise no matter what. That to me is not, you don't earn that. I just give it. But food and toys. So how do you know when the dog says, I'm having so much fun with this, I don't need it? Well, the first question I'd ask is, do you actually need to know the answer to that question? Because if you don't, why would you ever remove it? Now it's a package deal. So I love my work. I truly do. I feel like I've been unbelievably lucky in life. I also like to get paid for it. So why take my money away? Right? Can't I have both? Now, admittedly, because I do love my work, if things got a little weird for a while and my income went down, as long as I'm not struggling too much, I'll probably be okay. But in general, there's no reason to completely remove the reinforcer. However, it is also true that some dog sports do not allow reinforcers in the ring. So the sports that I usually do, like obedience, you're in the ring for 5 or 10 minutes, there's no cookies, there's no toys. So what I suggest to people is, rather than thinking about taking it away, think about making the size of the reward bigger. So not one cookie, 10. and fewer longer intervals between. So at first, every 5 seconds, another cookie, but after a while, it's every 2 minutes, but then it's 10 cookies. And you take your time giving out those cookies and you talk about it and you make it a process. You make it fun for your dog. So I think that's generally a better way to think about it. But let's say for some reason you really needed to know if the dog got to the point where he loved the activity. Just take the reinforcer out and see what happens. So I do fetch. My dogs love to fetch objects. They do not require reinforcement. And I know that because if I do fetch 100 days in a row without a cookie, my dog will still run out with the same happy attitude. So
Yes.
that's how I would test that.
Yeah, that's fun. My dogs love to fetch too. One will fetch to the point where she's just exhaustion. Like she will run until her
Yes.
legs fall off. And so I have to
Yes.
watch for that.
Yes.
Another question for you, and this actually would be a skill that every dog owner needs. Can you tell us what you have discovered in terms of training loose leash walking? This is from Leska.
Yeah, this is actually my pet topic right now. I am becoming much more interested and involved in the pet dog world. So that's a big direction I'm heading. My primary interest is finding methods for training that are simple to apply for anyone, not just a professional dog trainer, and that the dog will understand easily. And so I'm actively looking at the different things dogs do and asking myself, what are the options available? And one of them is loose leash walking. The dog drags you down the street. Walking is a misery. It's a misery for you. It's a misery for your dog. And I've started to experiment. And what I've discovered, every time this is your 20-second introduction to this will solve all your problems. You're going to love me. Every single time your dog pulls into the collar and you feel it, I want you to walk in a circle. That's all. So your circle might be about 5 feet around, and I want your dog on a 6-foot or 10-foot leash. So your dog circle might be 15 or 20 feet around. Your circle should be calm, and you just continue on. That's it. And dogs, because they need to move, it's like a child. If you held a toddler by the hand, a really energetic toddler, for no reason, they're not going to run out into traffic. Do you see how that bottles up frustration? Because those children need to move. So instead, let the child's hands go, and he just has to run around you. Can you see how it's like, oh, I'm moving my feet. As long as my feet are moving, I'm happy. That's what I tell people to do with the dog. Treat it like a toddler. Let the dog move those feet, and then let your dog sniff. Who's this walk for? Be like, if you took a person to the Grand Canyon, you said, don't look. That's a lot like what you're saying to a dog if you say don't sniff. So let the dog have a minute to sniff the spot. And if you start to go crazy, move your feet. Walk around your dog. Because people don't like to stand still either. So think how your dog feels. They move so much more slowly than we do. So let your dog move their feet. And then when they're not moving their feet, you move your feet and continue on. And people are reporting back to me like crazy high numbers of people saying, for 8 years, my dog has dragged me down the street. And for this last week, we have had the most amazing walks. So then they walk their dog more. If they walk their dog more, the dog gets calmer and happier. Everybody's happier.
That is
give
so
it a
interesting.
shot. Tell all your friends about this because nothing will make me happier. Then Sunday I'll be driving by Anna's place in Portland. I'm going to see somebody circling down the street, and I'm going to be like, yes, that's it. That's what I wanted. So get this out there.
There's going to be a whole new wave of people walking circles around their dogs. I can tell you that much.
I'm so excited.
That's awesome. Now, my sister-in-law, I mentioned, she's got to have a question in here as well because she gave me the idea for this show. She says she has Newfoundlands and she's noticed that some of them hit roadblocks in training, people included. For example, jumping off the boat or taking a life ring out to a stranger. She wants to know how you can tell the difference between fear and not understanding the task and how you would break that down.
Oh, that's a hard one, and it's a great observation, because when dogs fail to do things we want them to do, there's usually a reason, right? It's the same with people. So the first thing is make sure they understand the task. You always teach in a really low intensity environment, just like with children, right? You don't take them to Disneyland and say, let's practice reading. That's not reasonable. And you're not going to get very far, and then you're going to be fighting. So you don't want to fight with your dog. So the first thing is teach where things are super quiet and easy, like your house. The second thing is to look for things like fear. Don't ask your dog to work for you. Instead, bring them into the environment and let them lead the way and watch what they do. Where do they go? What do they look at? Dogs do tend to look at things that make them nervous. As a matter of fact, here's a good rule of thumb. If you're not sure, look at your dog's behavior and expression and ask yourself, if a toddler was doing exactly the same thing, what would that mean? So if your toddler was running around, all happy, and then stopped and started looking at something in the distance, not moving, just standing there, that would probably be nervousness. That's not what we do when we're curious. If your dog does that, look twice, because that may well be fear. Something like the water dog work. The second thing, so you've broken that piece out. You're looking for the fear.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know if the dog understands, then I say, well, can my dog do a lesser version and be successful? So when I wanted to teach my dog to jump into my pool, first we just started on the first step. My step has only about 4 inches of water. So I would lure her. I would use a cookie onto the first step, and then I'd say, get out, and I'd give her a cookie for getting out. And after I did that about 10 times, what she realized is she couldn't get a cookie for getting out until she got in. So then she got in on her own. I said, get out, and I give her the cookie. And very soon she started to figure out, because she was afraid. And what she started to figure out was she controlled the process. So whenever fear is involved, it's really helpful to give the animal some choice about the matter. You don't want to throw them in the water. That's not healthy. Just like you wouldn't do that with a child.
Right.
Letting them choose, making a fuss when they get it right, and letting them say, you think that was brave, putting 4 feet in the water? Watch what else I can do. Dogs do it just like kids. They reach out a little bit more and you say, look at you being so brave. Give that a shot. Let's see if that helps you out a little bit.
Oh, I love the comparisons. Like, everything you're saying can be applied to my 2 and 4-year-old, which is so really funny. We have a question, and this isn't necessarily for someone who's in dog sports, but I thought you could maybe give your suggestion as well. It's from Heather on Facebook. She wants to know how to get their older dog to stop barking. She's a border collie and an incessant barker. Also, our boxer hound was taken from his mom too young. At 4 weeks, he's 6 now. How does he help, or how would they help these dogs with their anxiety and the incessant barking?
I'm glad you recognize that it's an anxiety. So the first thing to remember is that barking is a symptom. There's a reason. It's like a toddler. So here we go again. It's like a toddler yelling. The question isn't how do you stop the yelling? The question is, why is the yelling happening? So is the yelling happening because there's a stranger breaking into your house and they're frightened, so they're yelling, right? You don't have a toddler yelling problem, you have a person breaking into your house problem. What if their favorite aunt just showed up at the door and they're yelling because they're so excited to see their aunt? You don't have a yelling problem, you have an over-arousal problem caused by the fact that their favorite person is here.
Yeah.
Maybe tell them in advance so they know what's coming, right? The same with dogs. Maybe they're just so excited about life because they're yelling because your toddler is alive. They're happy to be alive outside, right? You bring them outside. So if your dog is barking, look around and ask yourself, why is my dog barking? Are there squirrels running around outside? Can you block the view? That's a really simple management answer. If they can't see the squirrels, they don't bark.
Right.
Well, what if you don't care if they bark outside? Throw them in the yard, let them bark outside. So if you can get to the reason for the behavior, it's much easier to solve the behavior. There are cases where the dog is, the anxiety is such that the dog goes through life panting in their own house and pacing. So then ask yourself this, if you had a human child behaving that way in your house, you would say, this is not normal behavior. This is not normal. That's when you go to the doctor. That is when you go to your vet and you say, I'm concerned about my dog's behavior. There are veterinarians who specialize in behavior. They will help you, and it may well mean medication. They use the same medications for dog anxiety as human anxiety. And the fact that those drugs work, the same drugs. Dogs have OCD, for example. If the same drugs work on dogs and people, what does that tell you about the similarities between our brains? Right? It's actually amazing how much we're like dogs. That's why the comparisons work. That's why people love dogs, because they are substitute children as long as you recognize that they're not being spiteful. Dogs don't even have the capacity to be spiteful.
Right.
They really are 2-year-olds. The mindset should be of a 2-year-old. Mostly they're just trying to get through life. They're just trying to make things work. So if you can just try to hold on to that, build a relationship with your child, build a relationship with your dog, get your needs met, get their needs met, the rest tends to fall into place.
They are such wonderful creatures. Denise, thank you so much for your expertise and your wisdom in this topic. I understand why you are so respected in your field and why people are just clamoring to sign up for your webinars, which really are usually sold out. So really appreciate you being on That Expert Show.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of That Expert Show. I learned so much today that I never even knew existed out there when it comes to dog sports and just dogs in general. Hope you got something out of it as well. You can always connect with the show via social media. I'm on Facebook at Anna Canzano, on Twitter and Instagram at That Expert Show. You can watch previous episodes on thatexpertshow.com, or if it's easier for you to watch YouTube, we post all of our episodes there. We also kick all of our content back out to you as a podcast and on Google Play or wherever it is that you listen to iTunes. I think I will create a tip sheet based on Denise's information because she had so much good information to share. I'll make it a shareable link that I'll provide to you if you want to just follow me on social media, and I'll put that information out there for you. So join us. We're live every Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific time on That Expert Show, where you help run the show.